So, I want to share with you today how I went from being homeless, sleeping in my car, to actually sleeping and staying in hotels like the Ritz Carlton within a span of, I'd say, a year, but I'm going to narrow it down probably within 6 months or so. So, I want to share that with you. And then I want to give you some tips on how you too can have a bit of a bounce back, some of the tools that I learned. So, if you're unfamiliar with my story, give me a second to just kind of fill you in so it'll kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming from. Many years ago, I was in a domestic violence situation. I consider myself not just a survivor, but now a thriver. But there are stages and there's a process. However, back in the day, I married someone who was physically, spiritually, and emotionally abusive. And he would beat me physically, and I would run away to a friend's house, and then I would come back. He would convince me that he was sorry and he was going to do better and he was going to get help. And the cycle would continue over and over and over again. And he would yell at me often in between fights, or sometimes at the beginning of one, sometimes at the end of one. And I say fights generously because it was really one sided. He beat me. I wasn't strong enough to try and reciprocate the strength. And so I kind of tried to calm the matters down by just kind of taking it. However, he would yell this question and then he would answer his own question at me often. And he'd say, Nicole, what is your purpose in life? And then he'd answer that question and he'd say, that's your problem. You have no purpose in life. And I would remember hearing this accusation over and over again. I didn't have the courage to say what I thought or to talk back. But on the inside, I was yelling, I was screaming, I do have a purpose. I do have a purpose. I may not be able to articulate it, but one day you'll see. It was kind of that kind of a thing. And I also knew that God had made deposits into my heart. He had other people encourage me and speak over me at an early age that He was going to do something great in my life. I had also read plenty of scripture that contradicted the accusation that I was now hearing. And so on the inside, I was standing up, even though on the outside I was sitting down. You ever felt like that? You ever had somebody challenge your self-worth, your value, your calling, your purpose? Have you ever felt as if, you knew you should say something, but you lacked the courage to say and do something? Well, this is kind of where I was. And I remember getting to a point where I was so discouraged, just even by being in a relationship with him, that I prayed that God would take me. Like, I didn't want to take myself out, but I didn't want to be here. You understand? So I prayed that God would take me in my sleep. His yes to me was in the form of a no, I'm not doing that. And he woke me up the next morning and I continued to live, but I really felt very limp. I felt like my life had been wasted. I was very young and I didn't really see a way out. Lo and behold, eventually God got me out after being in that marriage for 3 years, after wanting to give up hope. Eventually, I had to let go of the fact that I could not change someone else. I could only make a decision for myself. I could not decide to do right for him. You cannot decide to do right for anybody else. You can only decide for you. Can you imagine? You're afraid, and now it's the beginning of an escalated situation, and you know how it normally turns out. And so you're looking around the room and you're like, okay, he's starting to yell and scream. Let me find my stuff. And so you're looking and you see your purse across the room over there, and you see your keys over there, and you see your shoes over there, and your jacket, and you're just summing it up in your head as to how you're going to put all of these things together so you can get out. And eventually he, goes into the bathroom and he takes a shower. I write about it in detail in one of my books. And so this was my moment. But can you imagine the fright when it was finally time to leave? I gathered my things and I went down 2 flights of stairs because we lived in an apartment complex. And so I went down the flights of stairs and just being terrified. After that, can you imagine getting in your car and you're driving off and you don't know if you're being followed because now it's night. And at night, you can't really see who's behind you. You can only see lights. So I wasn't sure if he was following me in his car. And eventually, can you imagine pulling into an apartment complex and turning the engine off in order to conserve gas? And then every 30 minutes, turning it back on the heat because it was getting cold. But because you didn't have a lot of money, you needed to turn it off again. And spending the first night of peace in your car. You no longer have a home. You're no longer apart because you've made a decision that you'd rather be free and cold than warm and hated. And so that was my decision. And so I left and he began to search for me, and I would call up my friends and someone would let me sleep on their couch. And then I would surf to someone else's house the next night and sleep on a mattress that they had on the floor. Someone else would let me sleep in their kids' room because their kids were with their dad that weekend or whatever it may have been. And I went from being in Texas to eventually going to visit my sister and my mom and dad in Ohio to check in with them and to admit that you were right, Mom, I shouldn't have married him. And instead of my mom and my dad giving me the finger of you should have known better and all of this, my mom said, who was normally the stricter of the two, dad was kind of the easy one. He was the spoiler. I could get what I want from dad. But mom, instead of her saying, I told you so, she said, I would rather you be divorced and alive than for you to be married and dead. Get out and get out now. Now, to hear my Christian mom say that, to hear my mom and dad, who had been married at this point probably for about close to 30 years, eventually they had been married for 54 years. My grandparents, by the time they went to heaven, had been married 60 plus years on both sides of the family. So no one in my family really, that was not a big thing. Like, people didn't get divorced. Here I was like, I can't even make it work longer than 3 years. I felt like a failure, and I was 24 at the time. So I got out, and right before or during this time, I had finished a album with a record company out of California, and it was a small label. And I was living in Dallas, visiting my parents in Cincinnati. You get it. Okay. So then I went back to Dallas, and the record company had agreed to send me to Tennessee because they had the Gospel Music Association Awards, the GMAs. Well, I couldn't afford to go on my own, and I was couch surfing, kind of living wherever I could, dodging my ex, trying not to be found, because I knew he had the mentality of, if I can't have you, no one will. And I didn't want to be the one. I knew that eventually, when he found someone else, I'd finally be off the hook. But until then, I was the obsession. So the record company decided to pay for me to go to Tennessee to GMA to promote the little album. And at this time, it was cassette and CDs had just come out. So this kind of gives you actually, no, I take it back. CDs had not yet come out. I know this is time stamping me. I know. But it was cassettes, okay? So I was going to advertise it and do my part in promotions. While I'm there, I'm seeing all of these other artists that I had only heard on the radio, but now I was seeing them and I was close enough to touch them, and people were introducing me to them, and I was just like, oh, overload. Now I'm free from my abuser, so I'm feeling like, but I'm also a little nervous because I don't know if at any minute he's going to pop up and show out. So I'm kind of like this right here, okay? But I'm leaning more to I'm free, and at least I'm around people, because typically he wouldn't make a big scene if there were other people around, typically. Okay. So I'm in Tennessee at this point and enjoying myself. Before I know it, an artist eventually hires me to teach him stage presentation. He sees me dancing around, just acting up, and, my feet are doing certain things. And he's like, hey, can you help me with my stage show? Absolutely. So I stay in Tennessee long enough to teach him certain things. And I tell everybody I'm on the run and can you help me look out? And I don't know if I was just bleeding internally, externally, or if it was a part of my need for validation that I had made the right decision to say, I'm not crazy, right? And as I began to verbalize what I had come out of, it sounds so whacked. It was crazier hearing me articulate what I had gone through than it felt when I was living it. I guess it was kind of like that frog in the hot water. You kind of get used to the temperature, and before you know it, you're like boiled to death. But you didn't notice the temperature going up by 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, boil. So anyway, I began to tell it, and these different people began to watch out for me. So he hired me, and then he found places for me to be able to stay. So I stayed. One of his friends had an extra bedroom, but she was waiting for her new roommate to come. And so until then, she allowed me to sleep in the empty bedroom. So I slept on the floor, had my little covers. Someone else offered me a futon. I slept on. Someone else had an extra bedroom that they allowed me to sleep in. So I was just kind of like homeless. I didn't have an address. So I would send the inquiries to my sister's house and my mom's house, mom and dad's house in Ohio. But I was currently surfing around in Tennessee with no address, okay? Just at the mercy of whoever would have compassion on me at this time. So eventually, the guy I was teaching choreography to, he hired me to do background singing for him. And at one of the practices, instead of practicing on the mic, I had so much energy. I think I was just so excited to be free, I'm not gonna lie, that I was just dancing around. And the guitarist asked me, hey, can you show me that move? So I was like, okay. So, it's the arms and the legs going. And so I was showing him how to do it. And before I knew it, he said, hey, so what are your plans, like your musical plans for this summer? And I said, well, I have a new album out and I'm planning on doing some skating rinks and have some little dates here and there. I was ready to do it, okay? And he said to me, would you be interested in going on tour with Amy Grant? He may as well ask me if I was interested in him giving me $1 billion. I'm telling you, because what he did not know was growing up, I thought I was the Black Amy Grant. You couldn't tell me? Okay. I had all her albums. I knew her songs. I knew about her. We didn't have the internet, but I was looking on the back of records. Y'all, some of y'all remember what I'm talking about, okay? The back of the vinyl jacket, sometimes they'd have the paper on the inside. You take out and you look and you study it and you know all the players and the producers and the writers and the companies and you're just like, whoo. So when he said Amy, I was like, yeah. But I was also thinking, yeah, right. Because here I was on the run from an abuser. Even though these moments of joy felt like the best time, it was also the worst time of my life. And I thought that because I had gotten myself into this situation of domestic violence in the regards of, I should have listened to my mom when she warned me and said, this is not God, this is not it. But my pride took over and I was like, I'm going to show her. All right. So when he said that to me, I was thinking, yeah, right. I can't imagine God allowing something good to happen to me or happen for me right now. I enjoyed the little pockets of joy, but this was over the top. And I had really felt like I had just disqualified myself from any goodness God may have had because I had chosen poorly. However, I will say this. While I was in that situation, I would always keep in the back of my mind that if God ever had the goodness he had promised me when I was younger still available for me now that I was older, then I had to keep the lines of communication open between us by not allowing any unforgiveness to build up. So after every beating, after every telling off, after every cursing of I had no purpose, I chose to forgive. Each time on purpose, as an act of my will. It didn't make my abuser right. No, he was still dead dog wrong, okay? But it put me in the right with God, and I didn't have unforgiveness stacking up like bricks, which would create a wall between God and I. I didn't want that. He wasn't worth that. The guy wasn't. So back to the guitarist asking me, I was like, yeah, I would love to, but I was thinking, this is never going to happen for me. I didn't say it, but I just kind of thought it. Well, long story short, a couple of weeks later, I wound up making my way to Ohio to see my sister. So from Texas to Tennessee to Ohio. And while I was there, her management called me and asked if I would be interested in going on one of the dates that she had. And I think it was to Boston. And I was like, yes. And so I came, did an interview in the office with one of her managers. And then the next thing I knew, I was at Amy's farm, in her home, in her closet. And she was trying to find things for me to wear to her event, as I was going to be a background singer. So here I am. I don't have a home of my own. I have my little car. I don't have an address of my own. I don't have a phone of my own. I'm homeless in a sense, but thank God I had places to take showers. I had places to rest my head. Thank you, Lord. I had food to eat. Thank you, God. And here I am in the home of somebody I admired so greatly. And they said yes. So I'm in Massachusetts. And there's another background singer. And so I had already prepared myself for sharing a room. I grew up with sisters. We shared rooms all my life. I went to Bible school. I had roommates and we had bunk beds. Sometimes we had 4 girls in one room and sometimes we had 6 in an apartment. So I can't remember if that first one was a Ritz Carlton or if it was a Four Seasons. But we get there and the road manager hands me a key. And he doesn't hand the same key to the other background singer, because there's only 2 of us, 2 girls. He handed me my own key. No one else will be in this room. Can I tell you, up until this point, I don't recall ever having a room to myself. I grew up with sisters. We also had another family live with us as I was growing up. So there were lots of girls in the room. I went to Bible school, like I said. We had girls, we didn't have our own. After Bible school, I had roommates. After I had gotten married and was on the run before this Amy Grant episode, I was with other people at their mercies. Even the borrowed room that I was staying in, my friend who had the roommate who hadn't come yet, it wasn't even mine and there was no bed in it. But now here I was at a ritzy hotel with my own key to my own room. Oh, and I didn't tell y'all, they paid for everything. They paid for flights. They gave me per diem, which is food to, or money to eat snacks and stuff with and eat whatever. And they still bought me food and they were paying me. When I got in that room and I closed the door and I realized this was just a space for me and Jesus for the next 24 hours or so, I did what any grown-up person would do in my situation. I got on the bed and I started jumping up and down like a kid. I was like, yes, yes. I couldn't believe it because God had done something so wonderful. I couldn't believe how great this was, that in the midst of my night season, in the midst of the worst of times, God was able to also make it the best of times. And in looking back, I was like, okay, so what was the change? What made it possible for me to see that pattern? And just so you know, I've seen that pattern all throughout my life, especially since then. I've seen that same pattern happen, that in the midst of some of the darkest seasons of my life, all of a sudden, God allowed it to become one of the greatest seasons of my life. In the season of, I had a season of heartbreak and betrayal and, just crying out. God gave me songs in the night. He gave me When I Call on Jesus. He gave me I Get on My Knees. He gave me I Know My Redeemer Lives. And go and watch those videos, okay? But he gave me those in the midst of a night season. And I started to see a pattern. And I want to share with you the pattern, because it's not just something that worked in my life, but it's a pattern that works in all of our lives. There are laws that are not specific to certain individuals. Laws are laws. The law of gravity works whether you are tan, orange, brown, cream color. It just works. Whether you speak Spanish or English or French or Patois or Luganda, it works. It doesn't discriminate. And so there's some laws, there's some principles that are found in the Bible that apply in practical realms, in nature, that do not discriminate regardless of your age, your stage, your marital status, your ethnicity. It works, okay? And so I want to share with you some of the things that I was able to extrapolate that I would love to encourage you in your life, in your night season. You may not have gone through abuse, or you might be going through it even now. And I pray that if you are, that the Lord would deliver you as he delivered me. And I pray that he would make your night season just as beautiful as your day. And in the midst of your night season, he would sprinkle it with beautiful stars. And you'd be able to see planets. And you'd be able to see the moon. And you would be able to enjoy even what the night brings, because God is making it beautiful. And then before you know it, you'll be able to see the sunrise because you stayed with it, okay? So number one, these are the takeaways. This is what I would encourage you to do. And this is what I had to do. Number one, swallow your pride and ask for help. I know that's sometimes a difficult one and we don't like it, but you've got to swallow your pride and ask for help. That's what I had to do. You know, it wasn't easy because I had to say, I was wrong. I had to say, I didn't get that one right. I had to say, I need help. I can't do it by myself. I had to allow the Lord to help me because he was the first one I asked for help from. He showed up even in the midst of my night season of being abused. He showed up before I left. He was there to comfort me, to help me, to give me people to encourage me, to have sister girls surround me. But that wouldn't have happened, I don't believe, had I not asked him for help. He tells us if we ask, we will receive. If we seek, we will find. If we knock, the door will be open. So you have to swallow your pride and ask for help. Number two, be willing to receive the help. So now that you've asked for it, now you must be willing to receive the help that is being given, whether that's in the form of counseling, whether that's in the form of someone saying, I have a room you can sleep in, or a bed, or a mattress, or food you can eat, or a place for you to shower. It's going to feel humiliating. Well, I won't say humiliating. I take that back. It feels humbling. Humiliation is what happens to us. Humbling is what posture we choose in the midst of a situation. And that gives us back the control of saying, no, I choose to go low. Humility is needed. So when the help is being offered to you, receive it. I had to be honest, and that's the next one, is be honest about where you are. I had to be honest about my situation. And 2 and 3 goes together. So even in me being honest about my assessment, yeah, I'm running from abuse. Yep, I need help. No, I don't have it all together. Even in the interview for Amy, I wanted to put my best foot forward, but I couldn't lie and say that, I was something I wasn't. But then there's also discretion, knowing when to remain silent and when to speak, and each time being truthful. And so I had to make the decision of receiving the help and being honest enough to say, I don't know how to do this thing. I need counseling. I need mentors. I need people to speak into my life. I had to humble myself when I was asked by the guitarist about what my plans were. Now, here I was, a new artist, and I'm thinking, I'm about to go make my impact on the world. Here I am in Music City. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. And ironically, no one asked me to take the position of being a little superstar. That was not the position available. I had to humble myself and receive the blessing that was before me, because the offer was for me not to be on a stage as the main artist, But will you surrender what you feel like you are ready for and become a background singer? Will you choose the spot of a choreographer or a dancer? Will you choose not to be seen? Will you choose the lesser role and support someone else? Or will you only say, nah, if it's not something that's going to make me look good, if it's not something that is going to big my name up, then I don't want it. No, that would have been the worst decision had I not taken it. The best decision, one of the best decisions I've ever made was to say yes to being a background singer. Yes to learning. Yes to, I don't know what I'm doing yet. Yes to, I really need to learn what I'm doing. Yes to safety. Because at the same time, remember, I'm still running for my life. I'm enjoying the moment, but I'm also looking over my shoulder. I'm enjoying the moment, and I'm also looking over my shoulder. Because I don't know if at any moment, the joy that I'm experiencing is going to be crashed upon like someone crashing a party. I didn't know. And so for me, it didn't feel like I was taking a step down. I knew I was taking a step up. And the step up was choosing to humble myself in who I thought I was or what I now deserved. So basically, my little cassette career, I was saying, okay, I'm willing to put that on the back burner for something greater. And that greater is not the main spot. It's background. Can I tell you? It was some of the best year and a half of my life. We did a 100-city tour throughout the U.S. 100 cities, top markets, Ritz Carltons, Four Seasons, Waldorf Astoria, like the major hotels. It was sponsored by big corporations. We were on huge stages. We were mostly on tour buses, and I had my own bunk each time. That was 30 years ago. So my point is, the Lord allowed my night season to become my day season. And so here I am traveling around. 6 months prior to, I was homeless. Now, in the Ritz Carlton, because of applying these principles, choosing to go low. Humility is a gift we give. Humiliation is what somebody tries to do to us. But we can choose to humble ourselves. And there's no reward for being humiliated. There's only a reward for me choosing humility, even in the midst of somebody trying to humiliate me. That's a heart posture. When we choose to say, God, it's not about me. I yield even my cool points to you. I give it all to you. I'm trusting you. And the Bible says, unless the Lord builds a house, they labor in vain that build it. Unless the Lord watch the city, the watchmen watch in vain. So even now, I'm always asking the Lord, then, sir, I'm asking you, build my house, build my career, my ministry, my music, my books, my speaking engagements, build my family, build it, sir. Watch the city, because I can stay up all night. And not that we don't do due diligence, because we do. Unless the Lord sends his heavenly protection, all of our best strength comes to naught. And then the fourth one is be willing to learn and try new things as seed for income. So be willing to learn from people who already know what they're doing. One of the prayers I prayed in that season was, Lord, if it's ever your will for me to take center stage, then please put me around really good people who are doing a great job at it so that I can learn from them. And he did just that. There were years between my little cassette albums that I would do and the Lord finally saying, all right, now you're ready. I thought I was ready a long time before that. I thought I was ready at 16. Wrong. By the time the album that you heard of me from came out, if that makes sense, by the time my debut album came out, I was 33 years old. I thought I was ready at 16. God said not so. But it also follows the pattern of so many biblical characters that God anointed earlier, but he did not appoint to that position until later on. Joseph was told when he was 17 what he was going to do. God gave him dreams and visions. He would be, I think, 30 years old before he would begin. Jesus came to earth already knowing he was God already, but he didn't start his ministry until he was 30. We see David was anointed as a little boy to be king over all Israel. He would be 30 years old before he would actually start. You see a pattern? So there's a process before the position is actually filled, even though God may have prophesied something to our spirits or promised something to us earlier. But my point is, be willing to learn and to also try something new. And even in thinking of this one here, I'm thinking of Ruth in the Bible, and I wrote about her in my book, It's Never Wrong to Do the Right Thing. If you haven't read it, find it. But Ruth was willing to learn how to glean in a field that wasn't her own. She was willing to humble herself and to work hard for she and her mother-in-law so that they could eat. She was willing to look like a nobody in order to have something to sustain them. She wasn't consumed by her reputation. She wasn't consumed by, don't y'all know that I was once married to the guy who owns all this land? No. She was like, what do I need to do? Where can I go to go and pick up the scraps? I'm willing to pick up the scraps so that we'll have meals to eat and sustain ourselves. And because she did that, eventually the same field that she was working in, gleaning, she eventually owned that field and married the man who had allowed her to work it. He was a wealthy man. He became the bridegroom. And so Ruth and her husband Boaz, the man who married her, who treasured her, together, God gave them a son, Obed, who eventually had a son, Jesse, who eventually had a son, King David. And we know through the lineage of King David, we get Jesus the Christ, born in Bethlehem, the same town as David, the same town as Ruth, because she was willing to humble herself. And so I see that pattern. This pattern here has been the pattern that God has allowed for me to have success in my life. He has allowed me to travel the world, even outside of being a background singer. Eventually, he gave me center stage. Eventually, he allowed me to do these things and to be in these other places and to have a home of my own to where I can house other people. God did that. But he says in his scripture that there are certain principles that we must abide by. And one of them is, he says, before honor is humility. Humility comes before honor. So if we ever want to be esteemed and honored in a certain place, in a way that God approves of, in a way that God says, yeah, that's my blessing, then we must be willing first to humble ourselves. And sometimes humility looks like me asking for help. Could be from a police officer. Could be from a pastor. Could be from a counselor. It could be from an older, wise woman. It could be from a friend. It could be from a neighbor. It looks like me humbling myself. And the Bible says that humility comes before honor. So I just wanted to share with you how God allowed me to go from being homeless to the Ritz Carlton, and how you can apply that same formula to your life. Now, I can't promise that you're going to wind up in the Ritz Carlton. I'm not saying that, okay? And I'm not saying you're going to be homeless. But you can do that same equation and apply it to whatever it is that you're going through. And trust God that he is faithful, not just to what I want, but he's faithful to what he has said. He's faithful to his word. So anyway, I want you to know that you are loved, you're seen, and I pray that you feel blessed today and that you will take these principles and you would apply them to your life, that you won't try and change them to fit your life, but that you would change to fit it. Okay? So anyway, I love you again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next broadcast.